This recording is going to look at the referencing style APA. It will introduce you to American Psychological Association's, or APA for short, 7th edition of its referencing style, as well as showing you where you can find appropriate guidance. APA is known as an author date system, and it asks you to do two things. For any information that you've used within the body of your work, it asks you to provide certain details of the source where you obtain that information from. It also asks you to create a list at the end of your work, listing all the sources that you've cited within the body of your work, and that's known as a reference list. Queen Margaret uses the system known as Cite Them Right to provide guidance on APA. It comes in a number of formats. There's a print and an ebook that's currently in its 11th edition, as well as an online guide. The 11th edition of both the print and ebook follow the 6th edition. Because of this, as QMU follows the most up-to-date edition of APA, the 7th, it's advised just to use the online guide. We're going to have a look at the online guide later in the recording. But first of all, let's look at citations. As we've already mentioned, you need to create a citation as soon as you refer to any idea or argument that you've read about in somebody else's work, and at the point of when you're including it in your own work. As APA is an author date system, the standard format that APA asks you to follow is within round brackets to list the author, surname, and the year of publication for any source that you've used. And you can see this in the first example. However, if you choose to include the author within your sentence, as you can see in the second example, you don't need to include the author's name again within the round brackets, the citation. You just need to put the year, as you can see. If you choose to quote directly from a source, you also need to include within the citation the page number or page numbers that the quotation can be found. This follows the year of publication. In the example, you can also see that you need to place quotation marks around the quotation to make it clear where your words stop and somebody else's start. In the example, you can also see that you're expected to use abbreviations, P, if the quotation happens to fall in just one page. For quotations that are slightly longer, more than 40 words for example, the text should be indented as you would with a paragraph, and quotation marks aren't required. Information and more examples on how to lay out quotations can be found within the Cite Them Right online guide within the Basics tab. APA also has specific rules in the number of authors that might be accredited to one particular source. If a source has one or two authors, APA asks that all authors are listed, as you can see in the first example. However, if a particular source has 3 or more authors, APA asks that just the first author mentioned in the source is written down, is included, followed by the term et al. And others. There may be occasions where you're using different sources that have the same first author and are published in the same year. Now, to make sure there's a clear distinction between these sources, APA has its own rule about this, and that is to include the second author, as you can see in the example, followed by et al. It may be that an organisation is the author, and APA asks you to acknowledge the organisation as the author in the citation. There may also be occasions where you come across a source that doesn't have any year of publication, such as a web page. Now, for these type of sources, you do need to give very careful consideration about whether you want to include it. It may be that the information is outdated, has been superseded by more up-to-date information. However, if you decide that you do want to use it, but you can't find a year of where it's created or published, instead of the year, you can put ND, standing for no date. For more information about formatting citations, again, it can be found in the Cite Them Right online guide within the Basics tab, and just by selecting the American Psychological Association APA 7th edition option. APA also has guidance on secondary referencing, and you might need to consider secondary referencing if you wish to cite the work of an author that you've read about, but you've read about that work in somebody else's work. Now, firstly, it is good practice to always find the original source so that you can read the work yourself. Otherwise, you're relying on others to have accurately interpreted the conclusions, the arguments of that particular author. However, if you haven't been able to source the original work and you still want to use the information that you've read about, APA gives you very clear guidance on this. So, let's look at this example. If you were to read about a study that had been carried out by Smith and published in a paper in 2012, but you haven't been able to locate Smith's study, you read about Smith's study in a source authored by Crouch that was published in 2016. Within the citation, you need to acknowledge how you came about this information. Let's look at the citation in more detail. The first part of the citation, is highlighted in purple, is the details of the original source, the study that was published in 2012 by Smith, the source that you haven't been able to locate and read for yourself. It's then followed by the identifying phrase, as cited in, and that's telling the reader that you haven't read Smith, but you've read it in Crouch. That's flagging to your reader that this is a secondary reference. The last part of the citation is the source that you've actually read, so that's the author's surname, followed by the year of publication, and potentially page number. For the reference list, you can't reference the source that you've not read. In this case, that would be Smith's study. You can only reference the work that you've actually read yourself. In this case, that would be Crouch's work. So here are some examples of how you would present a citation, possibly in your own work. The first example is the basic format, surname followed by year. The second and fourth examples show how you might lay out a quotation and its citation. In both occasions, I've written out the authors in the sentence, so I've not needed to include the authors again in the brackets in the citation itself, but I have had to include the page number or numbers. And I've also needed to make sure that I've surrounded the quotation with quotation marks. The third example shows where an organisation has been the author. The last example shows how you would cite multiple authors. You might wish to do this if all the sources perhaps argue for the same conclusions. In the example, I've laid out the three sources that I wish to group together in chronological order, with the oldest first. APA also allows you to organise your sources alphabetically by first author. Each option is acceptable, but you do need to be consistent throughout your work. For each source, the author goes first, as always, followed by the year, and each source is separated by a semicolon, and these are all surrounded by brackets. So now let's turn our attention to the reference list. The list that's placed at the end of your work details all the sources that you've cited in your assignment, and it's organised alphabetically by first author. APA also has very specific guidance on how to deal with multiple authors in a reference list. For any source that has up to 20 authors, all authors are expected to be listed, as you can see in the example, with the surname first, followed by the initials, followed by a comma, and then the next author. The second last and last author are separated by the ampersand sign. For any sources that you use that perhaps have 21 or more authors, there's slightly different instructions. You need to list the first 19 authors in the same format as we've already seen. Then it's followed by the ellipsis, the 3-dot icon, then followed by the last author listed on the source. The ampersand sign is not required. For any reference list entry that happens to fall on more than one line, the second line and further lines need to be indented from the left margin, about the same distance as a paragraph indentation. More general information about formatting references can be found within the online guide in the Basics tab. We're now going to look at a few examples of how to reference particular material types, and we're going to start looking at referencing books. The online guide has a specific section. The box on the top left outlines the different types of information that's required to create a reference list entry for a print book as well as an ebook. The entry always starts with the author's details in the format of the author or editor's surname and then the initials. If on the book is identified that the names listed are editors, that needs to be reflected within the reference list entry. And for APA, that's the abbreviation ED, or if there's more than one editor, EDS. And these are enclosed in parentheses. The next bit of information is the year of publication, and that goes in round brackets. The title follows, and that goes in italics. If the version was more than the first edition, that needs to be acknowledged, and the abbreviation used is ED. Again, that goes in parentheses. The name of the publisher follows, and then for ebooks, the last piece of information is the web address. The layout can be seen in the examples at the bottom of the screen. The next example is going to be looking at how to lay out journal articles. And again, within the online guide, there is a particular section to give you guidance. For journal articles that have been accessed electronically, the information required is laid out on the box on the left-hand side. As with a book, the authors need to go first, and all 5 are listed as you can see in the example. That's followed by the year of publication, that goes in round brackets, then followed by the title of the journal article itself. The name of the journal that the article was published in goes next, and that goes in italics, followed by the volume number, that also goes in italics, then followed by the issue number or month or season depending on the journal, and that goes in round brackets too. This is then followed by the page number range of the article itself. You don't need to put P or double P for this, it's just the page ranges as you can see in the example. And because it's an electronic journal article, you also need to put the URL link or the DOI, and that stands for the Digital Object Identifier, and that's a unique code that's assigned to every article. All this information is available in the article itself, as well as any accompanying record, as you can see on the right-hand side. The last example we're going to look at is looking at referencing a web page. Information about creating reference entries for websites can be found in the Digital and Internet tab in the online guide. The author or organisation goes first, followed by the date the web page was published or last updated. If the month and date's also known, that should be included too. The title of the web page goes next, and that goes in italics. If the name of the website is anything different from the author, then that also needs to be identified as the 4th bit of information that's required for the reference list entry. If the name of the website and the author are the same, isn't required. The final piece of information is the URL link, as you can see in the example. If the content of the web page is likely to be changing over time, APA suggests that it might be useful to give some additional information. So before the URL link, it asks you to type in the word retrieved, with the month and then the day with which you last viewed the content of the web page, followed by the year, then followed by the word from, before then adding the web address. As you'll see in the example as well, because this particular reference list entry has fallen over more than one line, the second line is indented. So let's look at Cite Them Right's online guide in a little bit more detail. A link to the online guide can be found within QMU's Referencing LibGuide. The link to that is at the bottom of the screen. And as we've already seen, when you click on the link and first arrive at the website, you need to log in. The login option can be found on the top right-hand side of the home page. You'll be asked to identify Queen Margaret as your institution. You'll also be asked to enter your QMU username and password. You will then be taken back to the home page that will now have full access to its contents. As you've seen already, the home page gives you options along the top of the screen. The Basics tab gives you overall information about citing out citations, quotations, and any other general information. For specific material types or groups of material types, there are tabs we've already briefly seen: books, journals, and digital and internet tabs. So let's look at the website in a bit more detail. The home page has links to popular pages such as printed books or journal articles or electronic books, for example. There's a search box that allows you to search the website for particular guidance on a particular material type, for example. Cite Them Right also has an online tutorial that gives you more information about referencing and related topics. To access this, you simply click on the button that you can see on the right-hand side of the home page, and then just click on the Launch Tutorial button. You can always navigate back to the home page by clicking on the option on the left-hand side. There's also a space on the home page where you can bookmark your favourite pages, perhaps the most common material types that you reference, so you have easy access to them. And I'll show you how to do this. But first of all, let's very quickly look at the Basics tab. For more specific instructions for APA, scroll down until you come across its section, and then click on the 7th edition option. Here you're presented with a list of contents that you can navigate to, and it provides information about the reference list layout, dealing with multiple authors, page numbers, etc. Cite Them Right will always provide written instructions as well as examples. Going back to the home page, we'll now look at the Books tab. As you can see, this particular tab has very specific instructions for different types of sources, with the most popular on the left-hand side, for example, printed books or ebooks or chapters within edited books. You'll probably find that Cite Them Right has defaulted to selecting Harvard, as you can see here. If that's the case, before using the guidance, make sure that it's selected on APA 7th, and you can do this by just clicking on the button. And this will ensure that all the guidance that's shown follows the APA 7th style. If we click on the electronic books option, just as an example, you'll see that first of all, as with any material type, Cite Them Right will give you the citation order, a breakdown of the information that's required, and in the order with which it should go in. It also provides you with examples, not only for the in-text citation, but also for the reference list entry as well. And it also provides any additional information about how to lay out the reference list entries, or indeed the citations. If you wish to, you can also create your own reference list entry by using the box on the right-hand side. Cite Them Right will allow you to enter the information for the source that you wish to create an entry for, and from there you can just copy and paste it and place it into your own Word document. To bookmark a particular material type, just under the title there's a button called Bookmark. Click on that and then click Save, and you'll see that the button has changed. In any of the pages within the website, the option Manage Bookmarks on the top right-hand side is always visible. To access any of the pages that you've bookmarked, simply click on this, and you'll see all the material types that you've bookmarked already. Cite Them Right allows you to bookmark up to 30 at a time, and you can pin up to 3 on the home page by just checking the boxes on the left-hand side. To be taken straight to those instructions, you just need to click on the URL link. Back in the home page, the 3 bookmarks that I checked have now been moved to the My Pages section. This recording has looked to introduce you to the APA 7th edition, as well as showing you how to locate and use the guidance from Cite Them Right.